Lennard. Welcome to the Seamless Sounds podcast. Today, not Seamless Riyadh and not Seamless Dubai. That have been like the locations where we've recorded most of the Seamless Sounds podcast, but in Berlin, in the very nice Berlin Messe. My first time here. So please introduce yourself and Just Eat takeaway, which might many know from their own consumer behavior, but not all of our podcast listeners.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, good to be here and thank you for having me. Lennard Neubauer. I'm part of the Just Eat takeaway family, or in short, JET family. Been there for about 2 years now, and I help with our group strategy and the sort of day-to-day operations across our 20 markets. Depending on where in the world you are, in Germany, Austria, you might know them as Lieferando. In the UK, you know them as Just Eat, and in the US as Grubhub. We've got the family across 20 markets in total.
Yeah. So for the ones that are not ordering regularly out of home, which is the case for our family, for example, because there's not so many restaurants where you actually can order out of home in the more rural areas. Something special you need to explain here? What has changed since the times of Pizza.de?
Yeah,
which I think was the first in Germany.
It was, yes. Yeah, and they were around before Lieferando, which came into place 2009. So, yeah, I think the concept is in essence still the same. You're at home and you order something in from a place they'd usually go to in person. What has changed though is the vast majority of restaurants now are listed on one of the aggregators or for online delivery. Pretty much all of them have to do it because there's a whole different world out there of people who no longer go to restaurants as much or wouldn't want to go to the restaurants as much. So the marketplace in essence, which was the core idea of the original Just Eat founders, which was the Dutch company Thuisbezorg and our German company Lieferando. It's pretty straightforward. You go on an app or you go on the website and you have access to all of the restaurants around you. And you have access to their menu and they then bring that food to you.
And do you still see resistance of restaurants being listed on such a platform? Because especially in Germany, you see a lot of restaurants where they have at the entrance door this kind of sign, cash only, which is a very German thing. And then I say, okay, if they have cash only, most likely they would not accept orders from an aggregator, but rather have people call them and say, this pasta, this pizza, this steak option. So is it still the case?
A lot less so, especially since the pandemic, because restaurants had no choice but to go on to delivery at the time. Everything was closed. You'd be surprised how many, especially in Germany, a very healthy amount of restaurants that do the delivery themselves still ask for cash. So cash and delivery aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. You can be listed on an aggregator and still have the cash component. But it's very hard nowadays for restaurants not to be on an aggregator because at one point you've got the network effects working against you. If you're not listed there, you just don't get yourself in front of customers unless they know you anyways.
That I remember. So some of the smaller pizza chains, for example, they try to push their own app or their own website. So this kind of strategy has failed because network effects eventually won.
Network effects will always win with that. It follows the masses. And especially if you've been around for so long, like many of our market platforms have, think about Bulgaria, Poland, Australia. They've been around for 10, 15 years. Some of them celebrating 20 years now. You're so deeply engraved in the food consumption habit of people that it's very hard for you to drive as much volume from a restaurant point of view without that online delivery component.
Okay, so but I remember I had the COO of Domino's Pizza here, and they said yes, there's obviously a certain share of volume that is ordered via aggregators, but with their direct to consumer app, they can offer certain vouchers, and if there's a Domino's hardcore user, this 5, 6, 7% price advantage actually makes sense. And we had the same discussion this morning at a panel with Carsten from King Food Denmark, who's managing the Burger King brand over there in Denmark. Right now they don't have a direct ordering option, but obviously rely on aggregators. But this kind of brands do have the potential to do it, right?
Yeah, there's a few selective ones. Domino's is a good example. McDonald's is another one, especially in the UK and Germany. They're just that big. And a vast majority of the orders that actually come in, both in Germany and the UK, for example, actually are the big fast food chains that we know. Now, they're just that big, but again, because they're so culturally ingrained in the food consumption culture of people that it is possible. But even those would list on our platforms. Now, what they may choose not to do, just like Domino's, is that they have us doing the delivery for them. So these big aggregators like Just Eat, like Lieferando, and like many others, they have a big delivery component. So we do the delivery for restaurants.
For the ones that are not owning a restaurant, can you give us like a quick run through the numbers? So I don't think that's kind of a secret. If you're talking about like a 100, it's maybe too much. Maybe a €50 delivery in Germany.
Yep.
I go to Lieferando, order like for $50 at my favorite pizzeria or sushi restaurant. So what are the fees I have to pay as a restaurant just for the order? What are the fee for the logistics kind of thing? And is there kind of a monthly fee involved?
So there isn't. With the pandemic, all sort of sign-on fees for restaurants were scrapped because we wanted to be there for restaurants and give them opportunity to market themselves. So no matter where you go and you run a restaurant, you would enlist on these platforms for free, so to speak. And then there are two models that you choose from when partnering with any of the Just Eat family or any of the other big aggregators. One is what you typically call the marketplace model, where the platform, the Just Eat platform, was really just a marketplace. And you would pay somewhere between 11 and 13% commission to Just Eat for getting you that order. But you do the delivery themselves. Now, if you actually have Just Eat doing the delivery for you on your behalf, that goes up to 25 to 30%, which sounds like a lot. And we can talk about that in a second, but the unit economics of the last mile delivery, one of the reasons I'm here today, obviously very, very challenging for the big aggregators.
Yeah, I believe it. And I mean, we can run through these numbers. So for, let's say a restaurant, like a standard restaurant, like on a normal day can manage, 20 out-of-home deliveries, maybe even 50 out-of-home deliveries, which might seem to be a high number for a small restaurant from my point of view. But let's go with 20. Yeah. And for those 20 orders, like having the e-commerce infrastructure themselves and like a delivery driver, if you add up 20 orders times 50, so we are talking like $1,000 a day, they would pay $200, including the delivery fee to Just Eat Takeaway. Let's say they have like 25 business days running this. That makes like $5,000 a month they have to pay you. I would have a hard time to imagine that some restaurant can afford this with own infrastructure and own delivery drivers. And that's actually the pitch you're in. And it's a point from a certain growth stage. There's a breaking point where you have to reduce your prices, for example, but eventually they might shift like their own delivery fleet. But unit economics of delivery fleets usually don't work out, which actually brings me to the next very important topic, because we saw like many grocery delivery businesses with Getir and Flink and Gorillas and others, and some of them struggled, and their big vision was like always to become a logistics company. So eventually they are not only doing grocery delivery, but will also offer this for pharmacies, for example, smaller fashion shops. And then when I saw them pitching that, I thought, okay, but there was a delivery business before, which was, for example, takeaway. So why haven't they done it before? If it was so easy, so can we go into that?
Yeah. So I think historically why the big aggregators have been very hesitant with it is that typically we talked about the average order value is also lower. If you do your big weekly shop, you still go to the supermarket yourself because you buy hundreds of euros of worth for the entire family, food for the week, so to speak. It's more the small top-ups that then you would even be willing to order the milk, the chocolate, the sweets in the evening, the snacks, very quick ad hoc things. Now, that basket altogether, it comes to a lot less than the $50 that you mentioned earlier. Average roughly is about 28 euros, actually, what we're seeing in Germany, for instance, and a little more in the UK. But then again, throughout the pandemic, you saw all of these dark store players, the rapid grocery players like Gorillas, Getir, GoPuff, Zap, Joker. They were expanding like crazy. And they did that through the micro-fulfillment center, dark stores, essentially strategically located all over the inner city. And at the time, and they didn't do any of the big aggregators, Just Eat included, any favors, they advertised 15 minutes delivery times. There was a time where you would see 10-minute delivery times advertised on the London Tube to have grocery delivered to your doorstep. Now, to do that, you need to massively overstaff your couriers to be waiting outside these dark stores, and you need very good technology within these dark stores to very quickly pick these deliveries. Because it's one thing if you're just offering a bunch of sweets and crisps and you've got somebody just sort of packing these bags. The minute you offer 5 or 10,000 SKUs, different articles, from toothbrushes to crisps to beers to razors, all of a sudden you've got a pretty big dark store. So all of a sudden gorillas get to start developing the big technologies, robotic fulfillment. And that's where it just becomes so expensive, because you don't get commission on those, unlike the food delivery that we do. You don't get the commission on top of the delivery fees that you would charge consumers. You only get the delivery fee that you charge consumers if you're running one of these dark stores. And that's just why it becomes very, very challenging to drive profitable unit economics. I will say Lieferando, for instance, actually have their own dark stores now here in Berlin. We've got 2. It's very interesting. It's a good learning curve for us, but it's
grocery
difficult.
Dark store.
Grocery dark stores.
Not a dark kitchen.
Not a dark kitchen. We're talking about grocery dark stores here. And actually now we've got MediaMarkt products in there. You can buy Apple AirPods, you can buy hair dryers, you can buy beer, you can buy any kind of grocery.
And it's
really.
all through the Lieferando app?
All through the Lieferando app, at what we call the Lieferando Express.
How's the adaption there?
Pretty good. Truth is that
sounds like a marketing statement.
Well, it may be actually, but actually we didn't do this by pure choice. It's very difficult for us to get into the big grocery retailers here. Germany, especially culturally, is actually very opposed to that e-commerce drive.
Yeah.
Online penetration of groceries is a fifth of what it is in some of the other Western countries like the UK. So your Ravers, your Aldi, your Lidls have been quite skeptical about partnering with a last mile delivery provider. So in absence of any of the big retailers, we've had to get creative and figure out how do we get groceries to our customers, because, we need to find our growth pockets beyond food delivery. And the most adjacent and nearest one obviously is grocery and convenience. So for Germany specifically, that was our answer in the short term. In many of other markets like the UK, we're far more advanced. 5 of the 6 biggest supermarkets in the UK are listed on Just Eat, and you can offer from Sainsbury's, Co-op, Asda, Waitrose, they're all on there.
How do you fulfill? Do you need to stick with one supermarket when you fill in your basket, or do you allow the shopper to select from different supermarkets, so your delivery fulfillment needs to pick up stuff from different supermarkets?
So in its simplest form, it's from one supermarket, and then there's different models. Some supermarkets, especially the ones that are very open to this kind of partnership, they actually have somebody in the store packing these bags. Our courier would turn up, pick up the bag and deliver it. In others, our courier actually goes in there himself or herself and starts packing that bag, him or herself.
Okay.
But we would always, when you open your app, we would always list the ones that are closest to you, or the ones that actually have the inventory that you want. Sometimes certain things must be sold out.
I will record a podcast this evening with Udo Kieslich, the main e-food influencer in Germany. And one of the concerns we have, or especially on the e-food grocery delivery market, is that we have this inflation topics right now, less money. Obviously, e-food delivery is still connected with higher prices. So adoption rate is kind of stalling, even on low levels. From a global perspective, do you see this kind of stalling on international markets, or like people are still moving from offline into online?
So generally we see that trend, and as any pandemic darling will tell you, we rode on that wave for a very long time. Pandemic ended, all of the restrictions were lifted, and we saw that dip in demand, or sort of real pent down demand. But the overall trajectory towards that last mile convenience is still there. It's far more advanced in some markets than others, like the UK, and in the US it's far more progressive. GoPuff, one of the earliest adopters in the dark store place, did so, but now slowly other European countries are following suit. Canada, again, had to get very creative. Canada and Australia, in fact, both had some of the longest COVID restrictions in the world. People were locked in whilst we were already out here in Germany or in the UK or in France. So supermarkets had to get creative. So we're seeing those countries far more advanced, also getting themselves out there and customers really buying into it. Other countries like, for instance, Germany and Austria, Switzerland also, they're still a bit more hesitant. There's still a much bigger interest in the brick and mortar operations walking into these stores, especially once you go beyond food delivery. But that's that's for us to figure out how we drive that penetration, how we drive the awareness. It's a lot easier to do with big markets, big chains that everybody knows. Yeah, we would love to list Edeka and Rewe and whatnot, but that's not quite as straightforward. So you go to Berlin, for instance, the Spätis, they're on there, or you go to Munich, you've got Käfer, on there, right? But that doesn't draw quite as much attraction as the big names.
It's true. And one of the e-commerce or food bloggers in Germany wrote that Edeka's online strategy is picnic. Obviously, Aldi opened their own facilities now with our help with Spryker. So, I believe that's a movement eventually, like for big chains doing this, owning the customer, access. Yeah. We're coming back to this topic in a minute, but, as we're talking about dark stores, I would also like to talk about dark kitchen, because in my more or less hometown, Hamburg, I saw like dark kitchens with multiple brands. So you would go like to a dark kitchen, and then like this week they are listing like these 3 sushi brands and these 3 pasta brands. Next week, only one of those brands from last week is still there. And it feels like they're playing like an arbitrage game. So they are listed with one kitchen with like 6, 7, 8 different brands in one location. They see what works best. Maybe pasta is working better in summer. Yeah. And I don't know, sushi is better working winter, or the other way around, doesn't matter. And whatever works better. And eventually they all need like a stove and a frying pan and some ingredients, and people putting them together, and they need to leverage their production capabilities. So it felt weird at first sight, because we are used to this normal restaurants kind of thing. But in a platform world, it kind of made sense. And then I wanted to talk to you. So is it normal still? Is it a super extreme example, or is it kind of a normal strategy?
No, it's far more normal now than it would have been a couple of years ago. Again, the pandemic accelerated that trend, but the idea of virtual kitchens or ghost kitchens was around beforehand. And the idea that you utilize your asset, your kitchen differently, and you have the same chefs doing different menus at the same time, obviously allows you to be listed in various.
Is it different chefs? Because first we started this conversation with restaurants being a bit hesitant of being listed on aggregators.
Yeah.
And then when they learned, okay, now orders are coming in and have a much better utilization, then they think, okay, maybe I can even extend my opening hours, because I have this kitchen anyway. So why should I just work it like for 5 hours? I can do it like for 10 hours or 15 hours. And maybe I'm a bit smarter in like hiring people and whatever. So it feels like a new generation of like kitchen owners, restaurant owners, being this kind of it's really kind of an online first restaurant experience, this kind of dark kitchen thing, because they understand that having space for tables, having people coming to your restaurant and want to do the pickup, that's kind of extra cost you're adding to the org chart. And it was for me kind of thing, okay, that's an online first kitchen, which I need to digest this kind of thought first. But you say that's the way it goes now?
Well, it's certainly a growing trend, and we're seeing more and more of it. Again, the countries that I mentioned earlier, like the UK, like the US, they're a bit more advanced there. You would see less of that in Germany, for instance. Now, the aggregators, including ourselves, they're pretty strict on the rules with this kind of stuff, because you can artificially inflate the number of restaurants you show quite quickly. There's a bit of a health and safety concern. There's also needing to make customers aware of the fact that this all comes from the same kitchen. But yeah, it's a huge trend. So you'd be surprised. There's a whole industry out there of companies that only rent out the kitchens to virtual restaurants. So you'd have
How does this work?
Well, you own a kitchen or a couple of kitchens, and throughout the day you have different chefs in there doing different menus throughout the week on rotation. And either you purely sub at the kitchen, or you let operators of these virtual kitchens rent them. And it's, in that sense, very clever, because that kitchen is no longer just fit for purpose to do pasta or what you would be doing in a steakhouse restaurant.
Who would do that? Let's assume we are chefs, or you're a chef and I'm a marketing guy, whatever, and say, wouldn't it be great to have like Japanese pasta? I don't know if there's Japanese pasta, and we want to do it, and we don't want to open our restaurant. Then we would look for somebody providing like a dark kitchen, and we say, okay, let's use it maybe on Sunday and Saturdays, like apart from our normal jobs, and let's try a menu with Japanese pasta, and I do some photos and texting, and you do the cooking, stuff like this.
Pretty much. And you'd be surprised that the newest concept there is bringing in star chefs to create these menus for you. Oh. If you're from Hamburg, you're probably familiar with Go by Hensler, listed on Lieferando, by the way, very successfully. So, and that's exactly that. Hensler, who I know very well and who we've partnered up with, he created that menu, and that's purely for delivery. And that is specifically created for that burn-in. And we're seeing more and more of that. In fact, again, looking at Western Europe, Spain and Italy, for instance, we see some of the Michelin star chefs creating their own virtual menus, and they then sell them or essentially franchise them to be used with their name as a new restaurant, virtual restaurant that you will never have to go to.
I mean, just to digest and just understand, okay, let's say we don't have the Japanese pasta idea, but we say, wouldn't it be great to have this Hensler Michelin experience here? Here Berlin is kind of boring. Let's say Rotterdam. It's not there. So we could go to Hensler and say, we cannot cook, but we have somebody who has a dark kitchen. We would like to we would like to license your brand here for Rotterdam, like for our dark kitchen, pay you, I don't know, $500 a month, and then list it on Just Eat Takeaway. That's how it works.
That's pretty much how it works. That's one of the ways it works. That's one of the latest trends we're seeing. And you're seeing that everywhere. There's an entire industry out there now of companies who would own a bunch of these virtual stores. And they would license a lot of these menus from star chefs all around the world, and they put this stuff online, and then you obviously would list on all the aggregators.
That's far better. So our Japanese pasta idea, which you just created, we don't need to do it ourselves.
No.
We just need to create
pay a famous chef.
We just need to create enough buzz around it.
Yeah.
So people come to us and say, you know, I run a dark kitchen and I want to sell it.
Yeah.
That's a much better one.
It is. And the minute
do you do it? Do you do it?
Yeah. We do.
No, but you as a Lennard, you have a license?
No, Lennard himself does not know. Lennard's pasta. No, but it's huge industry out there, and it's developing it, and you actually see by adding the celebrity chef component to it, the prices are immediately much higher. So the Go Hensler, for instance, the average basket that we see there is far bigger than the average Lieferando one.
And he's not even a good chef.
Well, it depends on what you ask. I think the sushi's pretty darn good. But be that as it may, that's again a different way to innovate in the industry, actually just capturing what's already out there slightly differently and remarketing it.
I definitely need to ask him one of the podcasts. I need to invite the chef and ask him why they are still doing this stuff in the kitchen their own, because I saw a lot of documentaries on Netflix and on Michelin chefs, and it seems like it's a disastrous kind of job because it's like a 24-hour. It's so much better to have like a TV show and a brand like position, so you can sell this license.
It is, and it's an expensive game. Make no mistake. But what's interesting for the everyday consumer is
expensive for the franchisee.
For the franchisee,
what we don't need to take the Hensler example, but let's take the Rotterdam example. So we would try to get a license from a chef. What do we need to pay?
So there's one of royalty fee that you pay depending on the size of the fame of that chef.
Okay.
And then you
ballpark.
It really varies. I couldn't say.
But 5 digits.
Yeah, something like that. But that's before you even start talking. And then typically there would be commission on every single order. Now, not the kind of commission that Lieferando would take off your average restaurant, but a very small percentage of every delivery that goes out. I mean, that's why it's so lucrative.
And a monthly royalty fee.
Again, that depends. Wouldn't typically be the case. But that's where we really see.
Now being a famous like TV cook makes sense.
And it's a different way for you to sell your name. That's how you get out there, which is again where the marketplace phenomenon of a Lieferando is so interesting, because we're also creating different type of supply for our consumers who no longer just see all of the restaurants that are around them that probably know by now, but we're creating restaurants they can't even go to in person. And that's again a whole different way of us providing more supply.
Okay, and then maybe last question is, as we're running out of time, like on the customer persona, because obviously when Pizza.de started, it was like usually the students persona targeting this. But when you're now describing, okay, people are paying way higher prices for a franchise brand, whatever. So is it really now a thing also like in high income households where you live like in your villa and like getting food, maybe food for two, paying $100 and more, like for delivered food?
Big time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's obviously, that's where we, Just Eat, but also our competitors are looking for untapped potential, because you're completely right. The historic reputation of food takeaways, the sort of hangover Sunday.
Does it make sense to have it like in one app? Wouldn't it make sense then to have like an extra app, like the Jet Black?
Yeah. Probably not, because believe it or not, even though we've got very very good restaurants out there on our platform, you know, way over 60,000, for instance, just in the UK alone, people still like the McDonald's. They still like the pizza and burgers next door.
For the rich couple in the villa, that wants to have only like the high quality stuff, and they don't want to see you don't want to see the burgers and the pizza like when you're selecting. You only want to see like stuff beyond like $50.
Yeah. Well, you would sort it by price range. I think for us it wouldn't be sustainable to be running our own app. But be that as it may, that is a whole different world out there that we can tap into, and we're going to get more in. To give an example, I don't know if you've ever been to London, Hakkasan, one of the most glamorous Mayfair restaurants, is actually listed on the aggregators there. Cheapest dish you'll find there is 15, 20 euros just for a starter.
So many new ideas just out of these like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So, I definitely need to do follow up with you on these topics. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.